Today, we want to tell you about a plane crash that is not an accident, but a murder. Driven by the greed of the airline company, it has not only cost hundreds of innocent lives, but also left their families without even their loved ones' bodies. The place where this plane crashed was a swamp with thousands of crocodiles and venomous snakes, making it impossible for any passenger's remains to be found. Airplanes are the safest means of travel in the world today. Whether you frequently take flights or are traveling in an airplane for the first time, at some point, you must have felt your heart race at the thought of an accident. What if the plane's engine fails mid-air, or if it collides with another plane? With these thoughts in mind, we often utter prayers and embark on our journey. Airplanes are machines, and they can malfunction at any time. However, if an airplane company cuts corners and neglects proper maintenance to save a little money, and as a result, hundreds of people lose their lives, it's not just an accident, but a murder for the families of those who lost their lives in the incident. This DC-932 passenger plane, registered as N904VJ, was approximately 27 years old and belonged to the McDonnell Douglas Company. It made its first flight on April 18, 1969, and after that, it continued flying for Delta Airlines until 1992. After using this airplane for approximately 23 years, Delta Airlines retired it and sold it back to the McDonnell Douglas Company. About a year later, in 1993, ValuJet Company purchased this airplane and began using it again for passenger flights. ValuJet Airlines was established in 1992, and since then, the company has been buying old and inexpensive airplanes and using them as passenger planes. As a result, this airline has been surrounded by controversies right from the beginning. To save on expenses, this company neither properly maintained its airplanes nor provided adequate training and facilities to its staff. The reputation of this airline was so poor that in 1995, the U.S. military prohibited its soldiers from traveling on this airline. On May 11, 1996, at Miami International Airport in Florida, ValuJet Airlines Flight number 592 was preparing to depart from William B. Hartsfield Atlanta International Airport in Atlanta, Georgia. Along with 5 crew members, 105 passengers were slowly boarding the plane. The flight was being led by Captain Candy Kubek, who was 35 years old and had accumulated 8,928 hours of flying experience in her career. The first officer, Hazen, was also a seasoned pilot with 11,800 hours of flying experience. Like all the other planes of ValuJet Airlines, the condition of this plane was also subpar. Prior to this flight, it had to either make an emergency landing or cancel its flights 12 times due to various issues, mainly related to engine problems or air pressure in the passenger cabin. As mentioned before, despite these issues, ValuJet Airlines was still using this plane with cost-cutting in mind. According to the plane's weight and balance form, on that day, there was a total of 4,109 pounds of passenger luggage and additional cargo loaded onto the plane. In addition to 2 tires and wheels, the cargo included 5 containers, each labeled oxygen canister. These 5 containers contained approximately 144 chemical oxygen generators, each about the size of a tennis ball. It's worth noting that these oxygen generators had expired quite some time ago. A chemical oxygen generator is a device that releases oxygen through a chemical reaction. The cargo compartment of the plane is sealed entirely to prevent oxygen from the external environment, which helps prevent fires in the cargo compartment. Since there is no oxygen inside the cargo compartment, if a fire were to break out in any cargo, it would quickly extinguish on its own due to the lack of oxygen. This is why there were no smoke detectors installed in the cargo compartment of these planes. The plane begins its roll-off from the departure gate at approximately 1:40 p.m. in the afternoon. As the plane was slowly taxiing on the taxiway toward the runway, one of the oxygen generators from the cargo compartment activated on its own. As we mentioned earlier, these oxygen generators release oxygen slowly after a series of chemical reactions, and because of this, the generator itself becomes very hot. Even though oxygen was not coming into the cargo compartment from the outside, these oxygen generators were releasing oxygen inside the compartment, which is why the hot generator could have ignited a fire at any moment. With the unknown pilot slowly bringing the plane to the runway, and after receiving permission from the ATC tower at around 2:03 in the afternoon, ValuJet Flight 592 started to accelerate down the runway at full power. The plane was still on the runway when the oxygen generators smoldering in the cargo compartment ignited into flames. Along with the oxygen generators, the fire also spreads to other cargo stored in the cargo compartment, and the presence of tires in the cargo compartment causes the fire to intensify in a terrifying manner. After running on the runway for approximately 1 minute, the flight finally takes off. The pilot was still unaware of the disaster unfolding in the cargo compartments, but a few minutes after takeoff, a smell of smoke and the presence of fire starts spreading in the passenger cabin. The smoke was slowly seeping into the passenger cabin when suddenly, due to the fire, one of the tires stored in the cargo compartment exploded with a loud bang. The entire plane shakes from the explosion, and the fire slowly makes its way down to the floor of the passenger cabin. Suddenly, all the electrical equipment on the plane starts shutting down. An air hostess quickly rushes to the cockpit and informs the pilot about the fire in the passenger cabin. The smoke from the fire had already reached the cockpit by then. The first officer immediately contacts the Miami ATC tower and provides them with information about the fire on the flight. He requests permission to make an emergency landing at Miami Airport. Given the seriousness of the situation, the ATC tower immediately granted permission to ValuJet Flight to land at Miami Airport. The pilot is instructed to turn the flight around to a heading of 270 degrees and return to Miami Airport. If you liked our video, please encourage us by clicking on the like and subscribe buttons. We are really grateful to you for your kind cooperation. Thanks a lot. In an attempt to reduce the plane's altitude, Captain Candy Quebec tries to decrease engine power. However, she soon realizes that the throttle of the engine number 1 is jammed due to the fire. While the throttle of engine number 2 was still operational, Captain Candy Quebec attempted to reduce engine power using it. However, due to the throttle jam, the plane's left engine was now producing more thrust than the right engine, causing the plane to slowly bank to the right. Seeing the rapidly spreading fire and the failure of control systems one by one, Captain Candy quickly uses the radar to make a sharp right turn in order to reach Miami Airport as quickly as possible. The ATC tower was continuously communicating with the pilots, guiding them to ensure the plane could land as quickly as possible. However, due to the rapidly spreading fire, fate had other plans, and the plane's control systems eventually failed completely. The plane was now entirely out of the pilot's control. The fire and smoke spread so rapidly that both pilots in the cockpit lost consciousness. The ATC controller repeatedly tries to contact the pilots, but there is no response from their end. Out of control, the plane crashes directly into the ground, nose first. All 110 people on board the plane tragically lost their lives in this devastating accident. The plane crashed in a vast, swampy jungle just a few miles from the airport. When the rescue team arrived at the crash site, they couldn't find any sign of the ValuJet plane. How could they? The crash had occurred in a massive and treacherous, swampy area in the southern part of Florida, filled with water and mud year-round. This swamp was home to some of the world's largest and most dangerous reptiles, including alligators and crocodiles, which could devour even the largest animals in the blink of an eye. The plane had crashed right in the heart of this swamp, making it nearly impossible for the rescue team to reach the site. Despite risking their own lives for weeks, searching for the plane or any survivors, all they could find were small fragments of wreckage and bits of human flesh. What happened to the people traveling in the dangerous swamp filled with crocodiles? Thinking about it makes their whole bodies shiver in fear. When a worker in the rescue team found some clothes belonging to a small child, the horrifying scene shook him to the core. He was so devastated that he decided to quit his job. In this tragedy, those who lost their family members couldn't even find their bodies, let alone any identification. People had the sorrow of losing their loved ones, but even more anger and resentment were directed towards those responsible for this tragedy in order to bring them to justice. The plane had completely disintegrated upon impact. However, after considerable efforts, the plane's black box was recovered and the investigation into this horrifying incident began. When the investigators checked the cargo list on the plane, they discovered information about the oxygen generator. Now, the question arose as to why ValuJet Airlines decided to bring such a dangerous device on any passenger plane. The answer was straightforward. ValuJet Airlines had entrusted the responsibility of checking and loading the cargo in the plane to an agency that lacked specific expertise in identifying hazardous cargo that could be loaded onto a plane, all in an effort to save some money. The oxygen generators were placed inside boxes filled with paper and polythene, and it was written on top of them that they were empty. However, all those oxygen generators were not empty. They had actually expired. Due to the mistake by ValuJet Airlines and the loading agency, hundreds of people lost their loved ones. Investigators held 3 agencies responsible for this tragedy: ValuJet Airlines, Sabre Tech Company, and the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration. Despite a similar incident in 1998, they did not make it mandatory to install smoke detectors in planes. After the investigation, ValuJet Airlines was banned on June 16, 1996. However, it's a testament to the power of money and human greed that this ban was lifted on September 30, 1996, and ValuJet Airlines resumed operations. While air travel is generally a safe mode of transportation, we must also remember that the margin for error is very small. In the pursuit of saving a little money, no airline should be allowed to jeopardize the lives of hundreds of thousands of people.